In the mid-2000s, Commander Bobby Thompson was everywhere. He attended White House events with President George W. Bush. He posed for photos with Senator John McCain, House Speaker John Boehner, and other Republican luminaries. He ran the U.S. Navy Veterans Association, a charity operating in 41 states that claimed to help struggling veterans and their families. Thousands of Americans donated. Good-hearted people who wanted to support those who'd served their country. People who mailed checks, gave at their doors, contributed online. Over 7 years, Commander Bobby Thompson raised $100 million. There was just one problem. Actually, several problems. The U.S. Navy Veterans Association was completely fake. Almost none of the money went to veterans. Commander Bobby Thompson wasn't a commander. He'd never served in the military at all. And Bobby Thompson wasn't even his real name. When investigators finally caught him after a 2-year manhunt, they discovered he was John Donald Cody, a Harvard-educated lawyer who'd been running elaborate frauds for decades. He'd stolen identities, created false IDs, disappeared multiple times. And he'd pulled off one of the most brazen charity frauds in American history. But here's what makes this story truly shocking. Nobody expected it. Not the donors who gave generously. Not the politicians who posed with him. Not even the former charity fraud prosecutor he hired as his attorney, who was completely convinced he was legitimate. This is the story of the fraud people never expected, because it exploited the one thing Americans hold sacred: support for military veterans. And it was perpetrated by a man so skilled at deception that he gained access to the White House with a stolen identity and nobody knew. Over 7 years, the man known by the name Bobby C. Thompson raised $100 million from donors believing they were supporting American Navy veterans and their families. The U.S. Navy Veterans Association appeared legitimate in every way. Thompson gained credibility for his organization by claiming that he and other charity officers were ex-military men, and that USNVA had been in operation since 1927, with dozens of local chapters throughout the US. The charity's website boasted of 66,000 members, cited substantial contributions from non-existent foundations, and featured thank you notes from soldiers USNVA purported to have helped. But it was all fabricated. An investigation would later reveal USNVA to be virtually a one-man operation run out of a Florida duplex by an unidentifiable man with no record of military service. The scam was sophisticated. Thompson hired professional telemarketers who called potential donors across the country. They'd describe the urgent needs of homeless veterans, struggling families of fallen service members, wounded warriors who needed help. The pitch was emotional and effective. The association raised millions of dollars through the use of hiring telemarketers that charged as high as 85% of all funds raised. That means for every dollar donated, 85 cents went to the telemarketing company, and Thompson kept much of the rest. Almost nothing went to actual veterans. But Thompson was clever. The association made several donations to needy veterans or other charities only after the association was questioned by reporters, and there was no systematic program established by the association to benefit veterans or their families. When anyone asked for proof of their charitable work, Thompson would quickly arrange a token donation, take a photo, and use it as evidence. The real purpose of the money? Political influence. Thompson allegedly used some of the money to make large campaign contributions to prominent politicians, most of them Republicans, including President George W. Bush, Senator John McCain, and Ohio Representative John Boehner. He attended events with the political figures and posed proudly for now infamous photos with them. Think about what this means. A man with a completely stolen identity, running a fake charity, was attending events at the White House and posing for photos with the President of the United States. This is one of the greatest White House breaches in history. Never before have I been able to find any other cases where someone with a stolen identity has been given access to the Oval Office. The photos weren't just trophies, they were marketing tools. Thompson would use images of himself with Bush, McCain, and Boehner in fundraising materials, implicitly suggesting these politicians endorsed his charity. And it worked. People saw Commander Bobby Thompson standing next to the president and thought, this must be legitimate. But the credibility operation went even deeper. He was so confident in his ability to give the Navy Vets organization the appearance of a genuine charity, he hired Helen McMurray, a former prosecutor of charity fraud in the Ohio Attorney General's office, to represent the group. Helen McMurray had spent years prosecuting charity fraud. She knew every trick, every red flag, every warning sign, and Thompson convinced even her that his charity was real. "It reminds me of the Madoff scheme," she said. He was able to convince a lot of really smart, sophisticated people. The fraud might have continued indefinitely if not for Jeff Testerman, an investigative journalist at the St. Petersburg Times in Florida. In 2009, Testerman was working on a routine story about political donations when he noticed something odd: a large contribution from the U.S. Navy Veterans Association to a local politician. He decided to visit Thompson's office to ask a simple question about the donation. What happened next set off alarm bells. Thompson was evasive, combative, and strange. He refused to answer basic questions. He acted like someone with something to hide. Testerman's journalistic instincts kicked in. He started digging, and what he found was shocking. The U.S. Navy Veterans Association claimed to have chapters in 41 states and 66,000 members. But when Testerman tried to contact these chapters, they didn't exist. The phone numbers went nowhere. The addresses were fake or led to empty offices. He looked into Thompson's background. The man claimed to be a retired naval officer, a commander who'd served his country. But there was no military record, no service history, nothing. Testerman published his investigation in 2010, exposing the charity as a massive fraud. State officials across the country began investigating. Virginia, Ohio, and other states banned the charity from soliciting donations. And Bobby Thompson disappeared. In August 2010, Ohio Attorney General Richard Cordray issued a nationwide arrest warrant. The warrant revealed that Thompson had stolen the identity and social security number of a victim who was not connected to the US NVA. Bobby Thompson wasn't just a fake name, it was a stolen identity. Investigators discovered that when Thompson was arrested, authorities found numerous fraudulent IDs in his possession, as well as a suitcase with $980,000 worth of cash. He'd been planning to run, and run he did. For 2 years, authorities hunted for Bobby Thompson across the United States. With more than 19 fake IDs, Thompson, whose real name is John Donald Cody, was a hard man to catch. Every time authorities closed in on him, he proved to be one step ahead of them. U.S. Marshals pursued leads across the country. They tracked credit cards, rental agreements, sightings. But Cody was always gone before they arrived. Finally, in May 2012, Marshals got a break. A man going by the name of Don Morset showed up in Portland, Oregon. He rented a room in a boarding house and claimed to be a consultant for Boeing, but spent his days at a local bar. The Marshals moved in. When they knocked on his door, the fugitive had neither a beard nor mustache when he was arrested. He was in poor physical condition and walking with a cane. He was carrying a backpack with an undisclosed amount of cash. They'd finally caught him. But even in custody, John Donald Cody refused to make it easy. When Cody appeared in court, he did something remarkable. He refused to confirm his identity. When a judge asked him if he had the educational background to represent himself in court, he refused to answer. "With all due respect to the court, the question you asked is an identity question," he said. "The state has alleged identity theft as part of their complaint." He wouldn't say his name. He wouldn't acknowledge who he was. In court filings, he went so far as to sign his name Mr. X on court papers. This wasn't just defiance, it was strategy. If prosecutors couldn't prove he was John Donald Cody, they couldn't prove he'd used stolen identities to run the fraud. But investigators had done their homework. They traced Bobby Thompson back to John Donald Cody, a Harvard Law School graduate from 1972 who'd worked as a lawyer in Arizona before disappearing in 1984 after investigators began looking into his theft of client funds. Cody had been running sophisticated frauds for decades. The Navy Veterans Charity was just his latest and most ambitious scheme. His trial began in November 2013. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence. 42 witnesses testified. Financial records showed millions of dollars flowing into Thompson's accounts with almost nothing going to veterans. At the start of the trial, his attorney had promised the jury that Cody would explain how the charity was part of a secret CIA blessed operation in which Cody was supposed to use the money to curry political favor. This was his defense. He was working for the CIA. The whole charity was a covert operation to gain access to politicians and influence. The money wasn't stolen. It was funding an intelligence operation. It was absurd, and the jury didn't buy it for a second. After a 6-week trial, Cody was convicted on 23 charges including theft, money laundering, tampering with records, and identity fraud. On December 16, 2013, he was sentenced. "It is difficult to try to measure the amount of harm your greed has caused," said Judge Stephen Gall. All the worthy organizations that count on small donations from good citizens to help further their cause. They are now struggling for money because people are afraid to give. John Donald Cody was sentenced to 28 years in prison and fined more than $6 million. Even at sentencing, Cody did not apologize or express remorse, but maintained that he has been misidentified since he was arrested. To this day, he's never fully explained who he really is or what he did with all the money. Cody has never revealed what happened to the $100 million he raised over years. Some was seized when he was arrested. Some was traced to political donations, but most of it simply vanished. The Bobby Thompson case isn't just about one criminal who stole $100 million. It's about the damage done to the very idea of charity. Approximately $62 billion is lost annually to fraud and embezzlement in Christian and charitable giving globally. Christians are especially susceptible to affinity fraud exploiting the trust that exists within religious communities. When people donate to charity, they're acting on their best impulses. They want to help. They trust that organizations claiming to serve veterans, feed children, or cure diseases are actually doing those things. Bobby Thompson exploited that trust in the cruelest way possible. He specifically targeted veterans, a group Americans feel obligated to support. He timed his fraud during wartime, when Americans were especially sympathetic to struggling service members, and he got away with it for years because nobody wanted to believe that someone would fake a veterans charity. The cognitive dissonance was too great. Surely nobody would stoop that low. But Thompson did, and he's not alone. Fraud, abuse, mismanagement, and malfeasance have been widespread, even ubiquitous, among charitable organizations. Non-profits represent 5.4% of GDP, but over 11% of all occupational fraud. The rate of fraud in non-profits is nearly twice that of for-profit companies. Why? Because charities operate on trust. Donors assume people working for charities share their values. Oversight is often minimal. Financial controls are weak. Non-profit organizations often focus on their mission rather than strong administrative practices. This neglect can be exacerbated when they enjoy tax-exempt status. Non-profits also tend to be more trusting of their employees, assuming that they share the organization's philanthropic mission. Thompson understood this perfectly. He knew that if he wrapped his fraud in the American flag and claimed to help veterans, people would give him the benefit of the doubt. And they did. For years. The politicians who posed with him have never fully explained how someone with a stolen identity gained access to White House events. The security failures are staggering. Thompson rubbed elbows with presidents and senators, used those photos to legitimize his fraud, and nobody checked his background. The lawyers who represented his charity, including a former fraud prosecutor, were completely duped. As the attorney for the group, she was convinced he was legit. And the donors? They're the real victims. He was somebody that bilked everyday people out of $100 million, setting up a homeless Navy Veterans Association that was fictitious. Everyday people. Not wealthy investors who could afford the loss. Working families who sent $25 or $50 because they wanted to help a struggling veteran. Elderly people on fixed incomes who donated because they remembered their own service or their family members who served. Thompson stole from them, and in doing so, he made them less likely to give to legitimate charities in the future. So how do you protect yourself from the next Bobby Thompson? Give to established charities or groups whose work you know and trust. Be aware of organizations with copycat names or names similar to reputable organizations. Be wary of new organizations that claim to aid victims of recent high-profile disasters. Do your research. Check if the charity is registered. Look at their financial statements. Ask what percentage of donations actually goes to the cause versus administration and fundraising. Give using a check or credit card. If a charity asks you to donate through cash, gift card, virtual currency, or wire transfer, it's probably a scam. Be skeptical of emotional appeals. Legitimate charities will give you time to think and research. Scammers create urgency. Donate now. Veterans are suffering. Time is running out. That pressure is a red flag. And remember, photos with politicians mean nothing. Thompson posed with presidents. That didn't make his charity real. The Bobby Thompson case reminds us that fraud can happen anywhere, even in places we'd never expect. Who would fake a veterans charity? Someone who understood that veterans are sacrosanct in American culture, that questioning a veterans charity feels unpatriotic, that people would rather be scammed than appear unsupportive of troops. He was right. For 7 years, he exploited that reluctance. He raised $100 million from people who trusted him, and he almost got away with it. Today, John Donald Cody is in federal prison. He'll be there until at least 2041, when he'll be 95 years old. He never apologized. He never explained where all the money went. He maintained until the end that he'd been misidentified, that he was innocent, that the whole thing was a CIA operation gone wrong. Nobody believes him. Years after the scam was exposed, some of the seized money is finally reaching its intended target, legitimate veterans charities. Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine announced his office would be distributing seized funds to actual organizations helping veterans. These funds were originally given by generous donors who thought their contributions were going to help our veterans, DeWine said. This grant will ensure the donations serve their original purpose by helping veterans. At least something good came from this disaster. The money Thompson couldn't hide or spend is finally helping the veterans he claimed to serve, but never did. But the damage to donor trust remains. The judge noted at sentencing, all the worthy organizations that count on small donations from good citizens to help further their cause, they are now struggling for money because people are afraid to give. That's Thompson's real legacy. Not just the $100 million he stole, but the distrust he created. Every legitimate veterans charity that struggles to raise money now bears some of the burden of Bobby Thompson's fraud, because he taught people a terrible lesson. Even the most trusted causes can be fraudulent. Even organizations that seem legitimate can be scams. Even people who claim to serve those we honor most can be criminals exploiting our patriotism. The fraud people never expected turned out to be the one we should have seen coming, because criminals always target what we hold sacred. And in America, few things are more sacred than supporting those who served. Bobby Thompson knew that. He exploited it. He got rich from it. And thousands of veterans who actually needed help never received it because the money meant for them was stolen by a man in a fake mustache posing with presidents. That's the fraud nobody expected. And the one we should never forget. $100 million, a fake charity, a stolen identity, photos with presidents. If this story shocked you as much as it shocked donors, hit that like button and subscribe. We're exposing the frauds that target the causes we trust most. Comment below. How do you verify charities before donating? What's your strategy for avoiding scams? Thanks for watching, and always research before you give, even to causes that seem beyond question.